Professor Michael Mandelbaum, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure to be with you and your viewers, Jacob.
So, Michael, we're going to talk about a highly controversial subject, which is American foreign policy. You have a splendid new book out, a short book that you wrote in response to one of your students' queries who asked you, where can I find a concise explication of the history of American foreign policy? And I guess you thought to yourself, well, there really isn't one. So you ended up writing it yourself, right?
That is true. It's a little bit more roundabout a story. This was a Vietnamese student who was sent by the Vietnamese Foreign Ministry to learn about American foreign policy. And since it was my responsibility to teach American foreign policy at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, he took all my courses and we became friendly. And he came in one day and he said, what's the one thing I can read to understand American foreign policy? So I rattled off a list of books and periodicals and newspapers. And he said, well, that's very helpful, but is there one thing I can read? And I was stumped. I couldn't think of anything. So I decided that I would try to write such a thing. And I started research. And I said to my wife one evening, in order to write this book, I need to learn the history of 18th and 19th century American foreign policy. I know 20th and 21st century history pretty well, but not the others. And she said, well, as long as you're going to do that, why don't you just write a history of American foreign policy? So I did, and that came out in 2022, and it's called The Four Ages of American Foreign Policy: Weak Power, Great Power, Superpower, Hyperpower. But having written that, I still thought that I needed a book that captured the essence in brief compass, and so I wrote The American Way of Foreign Policy. So it has a kind of complicated genealogy, but at last it's available, and it's designed to tell people what the essence of American foreign policy has been across 4 centuries, from the 18th to the 21st.
Now, Michael, the title of your book, The American Way of Foreign Policy, suggests that there is something uniquely American about its approach. Now, the realist school of thought in international relations tends to look askance at those kind of explanations. The realists would argue that all nations behave in a similar way to stimuli, that we live in an anarchic international system, that the domestic character of a regime is largely irrelevant to the way that it pursues foreign policy, that every state has its own integral national interests that it is seeking to pursue. But you argue in this book that that is, in fact, not the whole story. Tell us why.
Yes, well, you've put it very concisely, Jacob. The United States is like other countries in foreign policy in important ways, but here I compare foreign policies to human beings. All human beings are basically the same physiologically. They have the same body parts. Otherwise, the science and practice of medicine would not be possible. And all countries behave up to a point in a realist manner. But of course, all individual people are not the same. They have different personalities, which stem from different circumstances and different experiences. And that's true of foreign policy as well, and it's especially the case with the United States. The United States does practice and has practiced a foreign policy that differs from the foreign policies of most other countries most of the time in 3 ways. And these 3 distinctive features make up the core of the American way of foreign policy. So let me state them briefly. The United States has conducted an unusually ideological foreign policy. The spread of its own political ideas has been important to the United States. Now, most other countries, most of the time, have conducted foreign policies that are geared to power. This is, as you well stated, the realist paradigm. And that's been true of the United States as well. But in addition, the United States, where it has been possible, or where Americans have thought it has been possible, has sought to spread its own liberal ideas, individual liberty and democracy within countries. So that's one difference. A second difference is that the United States has conducted an unusually economic foreign policy in the sense that Americans have used economic instruments such as sanctions to try to achieve political goals. For most countries, most of the time, it's been the other way around. They've used political instruments, notably military force, in order to achieve economic goals. The conquest of empire, which is an age-old phenomenon, is an example. Countries would use their armed forces to conquer empires and then try to exploit their imperial possessions economically. And then the third enduring feature of American foreign policy from the 18th century to the 21st, which forms a chapter like the other two in the American way of foreign policy, is that the United States has conducted an unusually democratic foreign policy in the sense that the public and public opinion have had greater, wider, more intense, longer-lasting influence on American foreign policy than has been normal in other countries. In most countries, for most of history, foreign policy was the preserve of a small elite. That has never been true in the United States. So those are the three features that define American foreign policy, in my view, and also distinguish it from the foreign policies of other countries, which means that the American way of foreign policy is an essay on American exceptionalism in foreign policy.